Okay.
Oh, yeah. Mazel. Why some righteous people suffer and others do not? Student. According to what you have said, all the righteous people should be afflicted with suffering the whole time. However, we see that this is not true. Rabbi, the reason for this is very deep. God made evil with the characteristics that it has and made it function within the limitations that he chose. Now, he constantly directs the entire creation in such a way that evil will eventually be totally removed from existence, as we explained, note 20.
See beginning of this chapter. See also chapter 2, part 4.
However, it is evident that he needs to direct this process according to the nature of evil itself and according to the patterns that he set up for its existence. Having made creation imperfect in this way, he directs the world toward its ultimate perfection by removing its deficiencies. Only he knows the source of everything he has chosen to do and the reasons for all his decrees, which are hidden from his creations. They can only know the divine decrees themselves and their effects, but of what transcends that, namely, the reasons behind the divine decrees, they have been granted no knowledge at all. In fact, such speculation is forbidden to us. These matters are rooted deeply within the supernal divine will that decreed them, and they are totally beyond our comprehension. God, in his infinite wisdom, knows that two different approaches are needed in order to perfect the world. Either an increase in the divine light, meaning an increase and intensification of his divine emanation upon the world, or the concealment and consequent reduction of this light. Some things are perfected by an intensification of this divine light and emanation, while others are perfected by the concealment and reduction of this light by allowing evil to intensify to ultimate extent, as we note 21.
Now we have begun to understand why there are some righteous people who suffer and others who do not. The world is not rectified only by suffering and darkness. It is also rectified by an increase in blessing and light. Some people's role is to rectify the world through suffering, while others do so through blessing and success.
Anyone who looks closely at what happens in the world will see the truth of this principle. He will realize that everything that happens, for good or for bad, brings about something beneficial and positive for the world. Our sages have already told us everything that heaven decrees is good. Brachos 60b. God has many ways to perfect the world, some pleasant and some not so pleasant. These matters do not depend on man's deeds or merits. They depend on the way the creation has been constructed and its inner essence. Only God knows the true essence of creation, and therefore only he knows what it needs for its completion. All we are able to know is that it is part of the essential nature of creation to require both an increase and reduction of divine light in order to become perfected. This matter is the inner meaning of the 28 different time phases mentioned in the book of Koheles. Note 22.
In the book of Koheles, King Shlomo described 28 different times: a time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to uproot, a time to cry, and a time to laugh, etc. There are 14 times of expansiveness and blessing, and 14 parallel times of limitation and negativity. On a deeper level, these refer to fixed phases of increase and constriction that are built into the inner structure of the divine forces acting upon the world. These are part of a process bringing the world to its eventual perfection, and they dictate the times of spiritual light and darkness that come to the world regardless of our actions and merits.
Sages, oh, wait a second. No. Okay, the different stages in the waxing and waning of the moon in the heavens above are a representation of these 28 stages of increase and reduction. Fascinating. Note 23.
The lunar cycle is approximately 29 and a half days. These, at least on one day, the moon is not visible at all. This leaves 28 days on which the moon is seen. On 14 of those, the moon is increasing and strengthening, and on 14, it is decreasing and weakening. On each day, the moon looks slightly different. These parallel the 28 phases in the book of the Koheles and represent the same process of increase and decrease within the pattern of time that is bringing the world to its ultimate perfection. It is interesting to note that we are promised that at the time of the Geulah, the moon will no longer wax and wane, but will remain permanently bright like the sun. This represents the fact that at that time there will only be spiritual blessing and light, since evil will have been destroyed.
The sages were aware of the very profound secrets contained within the phases and movements of the moon and its connection with the sun at every stage of its cycle. They knew how the cycle perfectly reflects the whole process of increase and reduction of divine light, which is an essential part of the system that guides the creation toward perfection, according to its nature, as we explained. Jewish people are the vehicle for the perfection of the world, are therefore compared to the moon. For this reason, our sages have stated that the Jewish people are destined to be renewed like the moon. Note 24.
Jewish people are the vehicle God chose to bring in order to bring the world to perfection over the course of history. Just as the moon waxes and wanes, so too we experience times of divine blessing and times of divine concealment as part of our task of perfecting the world. At the time of the redemption, we will be renewed and bask in the closeness of God's presence, just as the moon will be renewed to perfectly reflect the light of the sun.
The details of this process are numerous and extremely profound. However, the general principle is that the moon, in all its aspects, reflects the process that is guiding the Jewish people and the world toward perfection according to the inbuilt characteristics of creation and not according to man's deeds. However, God divided the general task of perfecting the creation among all the souls he created to serve him. He did this according to his knowledge of what was suitable for each one of them in order to fulfill the purpose of its creation. This division of tasks among the souls is something completely hidden from us, beyond the comprehension of any prophet or seer. It falls into the category of the reasons behind his decrees that are hidden from all beings, as we mentioned above. Only the results of these decrees are known to us. Thus, there can be one person for whom there is decreed an abundance of divine blessing as a result of the root purpose of his soul. This abundance is one of the ways the creation is perfected, as we mentioned above. On the other hand, there can be another person for whom there is decreed a lack of divine blessing in this world as a result of the root purpose of his soul. This is the second way the creation needs to be perfected. The reason for the differences between their two lives is not because of their deeds, but because of the different roles they were given when God divided the task of rectifying the world among the creation. One situation is suitable for the rectification of the soul needs to perform, and the other situation is suitable for the rectification the other soul needs to perform. However, God ensures that justice is done. The righteous whose destiny was to be oppressed by suffering because of the requirements of Ken. No, maybe he wasn't talking to us. However, God ensures that justice is done. The righteous whose destiny was to be oppressed by suffering because of the requirements of the divine providence will receive their appropriate reward at a later stage. This reward will be in accordance with the suffering they underwent in this world and in accordance with all their good deeds. The sages gave the name Mazal to this entire component of Hanhaga that ignores merit and guilt.
As mentioned above, note 3, the word Mazal refers to a flow from above.
It takes note only of what is needed to perfect the creation according to its inner essence. They gave it this name because everything it does is based on pure divine decree and is not dependent on man's free choice or merits. 26.
The sages refer to this level of mazal when they said, lifespan, children, and sustenance, even of the Jewish people, do not depend on merit, but on mazal. The divine decrees from this high level cannot normally be changed. This must not be confused with the lower level of Mazal, which refers to the system of planets and stars through which God transmits the necessary influences down to the world. In Derech Hashem 273, the Ramchal wrote about this lower level of Mazal. It is possible for the influence of the stars to be annulled by stronger power from a higher level. It was about this that our sages stated, the Jewish people are not subject to Mazal. The power of God's decree and emanation prevails over the power that is contained within the emanation of the stars. See Sifsei Chaim Emunah Ve'Hashgacha. Page
However,
273 to 278.
Just to say though, in general, if you say it in Hebrew that and in la mazal, that someone doesn't have mazal, you generally say that they're like not lucky, right? I mean, it's kind of an ironic phrase, like it reads kind of as
Right, because we are used to saying mazal tov.
like I sometimes hear Baruch Hashem as Baruch Hashem, like God is to blame instead of, blessed is his name. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so this is a famous question. On the one hand, it says that at least when it comes to how long you're going to live, children, sustenance, there's mazel, right? It doesn't depend on your deeds. On the other hand, it said ein mazal li Yisrael. There is no mazel. So what's going on? And it's clear from the Gemara that statement about life, children, and sustenance, talking about rabbis. It's talking about the Jewish people. So I'm not sure. I'm trying to work out what his answer is over here. It seems to be there's an upper muzzle and a lower muzzle. Not quite sure what the upper muzzle or the lower muzzle decrees. Says this again in the note. I mean, I don't know if we need to get stuck on a note, but this must not be confused with a lower level of muzzle, which refers to the system of planets and stars. Interesting. So apparently he's saying the individual muzzle that a person gets for life, children, sustenance is on a higher level than the one of the stars. Maybe he means something like a natural disaster or something, that in the stars it's slated for that, but if we did teshuva, we'd be saved from that. I'm not sure. How did you guys understand this? The Or Sameach, Rav Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, great rabbi, he said it refers to the Jewish people as a people, a peoplehood on a general level. The klal ein mazal, but individuals there's definitely mazal.
Does it mean that the Jewish people have a will? That their destiny depends on an act of will, not on fate? Is that the distinction?
I'm not sure what you're explaining.
Well, what does it mean that the En Yisrael Mazal? Where is it?
That there's no mazal? Yeah, that
collectively
everything's
the
determined on God's will, or really our deeds, dependent on our deeds. Yeah. Just by the way, for the the Hasidim had a way of explaining deep concepts in very beautiful ways. So there's a story of Zusha and his brother Naphtali, and they're traveling through Ukraine, and the Cossacks, they're staying at an inn, and the Cossacks come in, and they start picking on them, and they're drinking, and they start picking on them more, and eventually, the Cossacks are dancing in a circle. And there's little Zusha and Naphtali are lying there on the floor, knocked out. And every time they go past Zusha, because he's lying in a way that he's kind of closer to where they come around, they kick him. They kick him in the ribs. So after a few times, his brother Naphtali is lying there and goes, Zusha, I can't watch you. I can't watch this anymore. Let me take some. So he says, thank you. And they change. And just as they change, the Cossacks go, okay, let's get the other one. Right? So, right? You have to know your muzzle sometimes. You can try hard. And I find it from a personal point of view, it's a very, I guess, unclear, but very ethereal thing to think about your life in terms of what do you merit and what is your mazal. You know, what is God sending your way as either reward or punishment, and what is, no, this is the world that he wants you to, you know, like you said over here, this is your lot in life, you know. Who's rich? Except the one that embraces his lot. You know, this is what you need to deal with from a very high level. You've been sent to this world to do this, you know, your mission, deal with the things you need to deal with in the best way possible. And sometimes you got to look at your life and go, well, yeah, I hear that's happening because, you know, of this and that action, or, you know, I could improve. Yeah. Okay. Mazel tov, Lev. You read that very nicely. Are we finished, by the way? I
Yep,
think you've got a few more lines.
Oh, you're right. Okay. 26 was the last note read, so we're going to pick up with however. However, I have already explained that this state of affairs exists only in this world. In the world to come, all deeds will be rewarded exactly for what they were, measure for measure. There will even be a reward for having used a pleasant form of speech. Note 27.
Reward is so precise that it will take into account every detail of a person's actions, even the fact that he chose to use a slightly more refined manner of expression. See Pesachim 3a.
Yeah. That's an interesting point, that last one. Because this world is, you know, this mazal is really a function of evil in the world, right? That God constrained himself. It just, Baruch Hashem, doesn't have, you know, that constraint doesn't affect everyone equally for bad, or for hardship. But in the world to come, so then, yeah, then it's, you know, what did you do? Let's see your actions. No, there's no mazal.
But I like that it takes into account even the very smallest things, even that you said please or thank you, right? Even that's a lovely sentiment, that even to the degree of the refinement of your speech is taken into account.
Thank you.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Lovely.
No, it doesn't work that way, Rabbi, because if it's done in a facetious or sort of sarcastic way, it's actually a negative. So my suggestion, yeah. So I'm in demerit city on this end because I have no mode of expression that isn't like half sarcastic. It's a problem. I'm going to not take any responsibility. It's an Avon characteristic.
It's done with love.
It's done with love.
There you go.
What do you want?
Okay.
I
Part
do
3,
like how
let's go.
it
This
says
is
even
good,
the
guys. Sorry,
I like
Jason.
how it says even the sort of bad things that happen to you bring out good in the universe somehow. I guess this is a cold comfort for the terrible things that might happen. Like, oh no, don't worry, it's all good.
Don't worry about that cancer. It's
Yeah.
really, it was for the best.
Yeah. Somebody's best, not yours, but on
Yeah.
some level for somebody. Yeah.
I mean, your soul was designed to suffer, but you know, it's just bringing about goodness.
Actually could be for your best. We just can't understand it in this world. We don't know that the suffering, like that may be like some kind of cosmic healing to go through suffering now for something that happened before, so that when we get to the next world, it will have already been dealt with, or that it's going to help resolve some other problem or create a scenario that is going to allow somebody else to have a window of opportunity to bring about like great change. And, you know, by your suffering, it's going to help other people because like some discovery will be made about a treatment. We just can't know. It's like, so, it demands such faith. And even in the darkest, dimmest of times, like, how did these people have faith? Because they made a choice.
Lev, I think there definitely are different schools within Judaism, but Judaism generally, and from what I can see from the Talmud, does not glorify suffering at all. It's shocking. It's terrible. It's like there should be none. Yeah, if it happens, like there's guidance to the individual, try in yourself, get some, emunah and strengthen yourself and know that, yeah, ultimately, like he said, everything God does is for the good. Of course, there's some good that comes from it.
I mean,
Rabbi Yochanan, he was one of the great Amoraim of the Talmud, he said, when before the Mashiach comes, before the Messiah comes, there'll be very difficult. It will be a difficult time period. So he used to say, I don't want it and I don't want its reward. Like you can leave, thanks, but no thanks, right? Sorry, Dan.
We're hearing a lot of people's expressions of like in a humorous way about really, so we're getting to the answer in the book, and that's the answer we get. Namely, we spoke about the importance of being a tzaddik and sachar va'onesh, reward and punishment, depending on our deeds. But then when we really ask the question, how is it that there is a tzaddik who suffers and a tzaddik who doesn't suffer? And the answer that he gives, again, I think that we heard so many people joking about it in the past 3 minutes, but really I think that the group is a little bit up in arms because the answer that he gives is, well, it's just draw, it's draw the lot of the draw. What's the expression in English?
Luck of the draw.
It's just luck of the draw.
I don't think he's saying that. I don't hear in this luck of the draw.
Well, some people are fated for suffering and some people are fated for not.
Right, but so if you, first of all, it looks like that, but he's very careful to say, but in the end, justice is done, right? So if you're fated for hardship, know that in the future that will be taken into account. That was a much harder, life to make good of. And the other thing is, it's like he says, we don't really know the depth of the decrees. And he says that, each person is according to their soul, the root purpose of their soul. So, you think about it in terms of, let's say that in God's divine wisdom, there's this plan for creation, which is, right, God's knowing God's plan. And from the darkness that he wants to bring into the world, he created souls. And those are the people that suffer in this world. So I don't know if that's, so you're gonna, can you still ask the question, well, why, why X and not Y? No, that's where you come from. You can't go further back than that. They come from that part of the world. Maybe, it does take a lot of emunah. It takes a lot of faith to look at the world that way, but I don't see it as a random anything random about it at all, actually.
Random to a human, because it's beyond our understanding or knowing. It's not even for us to ask why person X and not person Y, if I understood it correctly. Right? So to us, it's random. It's not actually random.
Yeah. Yeah. In our perception, you're saying it's random, right? But
Sure.
we're supposed to have the faith, I guess, that it is not random in the larger scheme of things. It's how we perceive it, because the truth
That's
is
right.
not manifest to us. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think
Yeah,
when
well.
we have to be when we speak about random, we mean objectively random most of the time.
So how do you correlate the word mazal with lack of randomness? Isn't the word mazal essentially an indication of non-reactive circumstance, reactive to your deeds? Namely, it is not reactive to your deeds. Even if you are tzaddik, you might have an easy time or a hard time in this olam, in olam hazeh,
Right.
in this world. Isn't, after all, I mean, I know I'm being a little argumentative, I'm sorry, Rabbi, but it isn't the
that's
word mazal indicative of the need to accept without understanding that it seems that we didn't deserve, a certain hardship any more, any less than the other tzaddik, assuming that we were tzaddikim, more or less, not that we always know if we really are doing, the right stuff, right? Perhaps we're actually not as tzaddikim as we thought we were. But nonetheless, suppose we're trying, and it seems that our friend is trying no harder, succeeding no harder, and yet there is unequal easiness of existence in olam hazeh, and that is what the mazal refers to.
Yes, but I don't think, again, it's a terrible thing that people. It's not terrible. It's just a bad translation, right? People say, mazel tov or good luck, good luck. Luck has the connotation of being random. I hope it falls out that way for you. I think this goes back to Shoresh and Neshama. This goes back to the deepest of the deep. It's the root purpose of a person's soul. And I don't think he's saying this in any way, but it would make sense to me to think about a soul coming from or being part of a certain part of God's plan in creation. There's Rabbi Cook. He was the first chief rabbi of Palestine, where he was an incredibly interesting person, educated in Volozhin, in Europe, in the most Litvische yeshiva, and yet he was like a Hasidic rabbi. He had and so he said that the Jewish people, Knesset Yisrael, is you could look at them as a person. There's a unity, right? When the Jewish people got to Sinai, it says V'yichan sham, he dwelt there. Who's he? The singular. So Rashi says K'ish echad b'lev echad, like one person. So he says we often find these phrases that the Chachamim einei ha'eda, they are the eyes of the congregation, right? The tzaddikim are the leiv, they relate to the heart. He said it's not only in terms of space, but it's also in terms of time. So he said that the neshamot, the souls of the Jewish people in the world today come from what's called the akev, from the heel, right? He called it the ik. It's this time period. He saw it as the ikvasam the Mashiach, the birth pangs of the Mashiach. But the word akev is a heel. So so he said, not the joke, but someone, Ramosha Shapiro, said an interesting thing. He said that's why, what are we sensitive to? Being tickled. We love being tickled. That's our generation. The rest of the time we're like that. And then, anyway, Rav Kook said that's why there's such a calling, even from non-religious Jews, otherwise non-observant Jews, but to settle in the land of Israel. because the mitzvah you do with your heel is the mitzvah of living in the land, right? Walking in the land. So, is that, we think about that, like our neshamot, our souls, with their purpose and what we've been sent down to do is, very deep, very detailed. There's a whole scheme over here. I was actually thinking about it to kind of give it a parable, but what's it called in a computer program? Like the recipe,
An algorithm.
Algorithm. Thank you. Right? Like this is a very sophisticated algorithm that God has, right? He started, Bereshit is the algorithm for the entire world. And it's extremely, extremely complicated, and it every single thing fits in there. So to me, that's my answer to your question, Uri. It's not the mazal, it's just part of that algorithm that does not take into account people's deeds. People's deeds is almost a small part of it. I mean, we see in the end, it's very important. It's what we're left with in the world to come. But it does not explain this world perfectly, right? For sure not. All right.
Okay, let's go.
Dev, you still with us?
All right, yep, let's do this. Part 3. Decrees of Mazal and their interaction with the system of reward and punishment.
Oh, now it's gonna undo everything I just said. Okay.
Okay, 169. Student, if that is the case, it would seem there is no reward and punishment in this world whatsoever, but only in the world to come. Note 28.
We have completed our analysis of the system of Mazal and come to some understanding of why the righteous can suffer. However, it seems according to what we have learned that our actions and merits have no bearing on what happens to us in this world. Whenever we suffer or enjoy prosperity, it is all decided solely by divine decree.
Rabbi, that is not the case. However, to understand this properly, you need to know an important principle, which is illustrated in the following statement of our sages. There was a famine in the days of King David. The famine should really have occurred during the reign of King Shaul and not during the reign of King David. However, since Shaul was like a barren tree, that is, his generation was unable to withstand such a punishment, God caused the famine to come about during the reign of King David. They also said, note 20, right.
The famine was supposed to be a punishment for the cruel massacre that Shaul had carried out in the city of Nov during his own reign. Yet it struck later on during David's reign. Our sages explained that the people under Shaul's leadership were too weak to withstand the effects of the famine. Therefore, it came in the time of David when their faith and strength were more developed. In the continuation of their commentary, the sages compared this to a glassmaker with a basket of precious glasses in his hand. Before he hangs the basket on a hook, he first tests the hook with his own weight to see if it is strong enough.
They also said when the flax producer puts his flax to the test, he tests only his strongest flax. Note 30.
Yeah, I mean, I say that all the time too. So.
It's like every day. I mean,
Fuller rendition of the sage's words is as follows. When the flax is of poor quality, the flax producer does not beat it very hard because it will split. When it is of good quality, he beats it a lot, since then it gets better and better. So too, God does not test the wicked because they cannot withstand the challenge. Rather, he tests the righteous.
These statements show that God only uses this system of mazal when he knows that it will have the desired effect. Note 31.
In order for the decrees of mazal to have the desired effect, the recipients of the decree must be strong and righteous enough to accept the suffering with perfect faith. In this way, the world is rectified. When the flax is too weak, God withholds the decree. God should have brought the famine on the people during the reign of Shaul as part of the decree of Mazal, but the faith was too weak. Although the famine was a punishment for Shaul's sin, it was also a decree of Mazal, part of the divine decree necessary to perfect the world. For with regard to the rest of the nation, it was undeserved.
This is because God
Whoa,
prepared
hang on a second. Whoa. He just threw a spanner in the works, as you guys would say, a wrench. The famine in the days of King David were really meant to be during the time of Shaul. And because of Shaul's actions or because of Mazel?
It sounds like because of the cruel massacre that he carried out in the city of Noth.
That's
Right.
what he says, right? So
What he
that
said.
wouldn't be Mazel.
He said it was both, I think.
And yeah, that's what he's coming to do in the end. He's answering that. He's saying, although the famine was a punishment for Shaul, it was also a decree of Mazel.
Because for the rest of the nation, it wasn't deserved, right? The Jewish people didn't do it. Their leader or their crappy leader did. So in that part, it's something that flowed to them. It wasn't as a
Okay.
consequence of their actions.
Okay, I'm not sure I love that. You know, leaders make decisions that affect their people, as we see. Should we
But
just?
are there people responsible for their leaders' shitty actions? I mean, he did this massacre. Were all of the Jewish people responsible for? I don't know the story actually. So
yeah, it's hard to say that.
I
I mean, it was his decision and it was his, mishigas in a way. Okay, I'll go with that for now. Okay, so the muzzle only works. Now, is that? Okay, I still don't hear where the interaction with reward and punishment comes in. It's just saying that the muzzle, in order to come into effect, has to be effectual. It has to affect, people. Okay, let's see.
Okay, sorry, I was muting. There's some background noise. So where were we?
31.
31.
Yeah.
Because God prepared a very profound pattern of forces in order to perfect the creation, as we explained. And this pattern is governed by two systems of operation: the system of reward and punishment, and the system of Mazal. God sometimes chooses to use one system and sometimes the other, according to what he knows is best for his world. When he uses the system of reward and punishment, everything that happens will follow the patterns of reward and punishment and their laws. When he uses the system of Mazal, everything that happens will follow the pattern dictated by the system of Mazal and the inner structure of creation, as we explained in part 2 of this chapter, note 32.
Later on in this section, the Ramchal explains that even at the time of divine decree, Mazal, the system of reward and punishment is not abandoned, and vice versa. Perhaps here he means that there are certain phases or events that are dominated by the element of Mazal, with reward and punishment just playing a nominal role. There are also times when the principal element is reward and punishment for one's deeds, with Mazal playing a hidden role.
The state of affairs, or this state of affairs, is another factor that increases the merit of the righteous. Were God to bring the suffering only upon the righteous, it would be a test for them, but not such a difficult test. They would at least be able to console themselves with the knowledge that they were definitely righteous since they were suffering. Any thinking person would choose to go through this type of suffering with the certainty that it is suffering of the righteous, since the wicked do not suffer. Note 33.
God would run-
Are there any thinking people amongst us? Would you choose it? If you knew that the suffering was reserved for the righteous. Gil, God bless you. Thank you for making the effort. Yeah,
Sorry, great to see you guys. Good to see you. We'll see you next week. Okay.
Are you going back
Be well.
to the Catholic?
Going
kids?
back to the Catholic kids, but I'm coming with new refreshed neshama. So I have fortitude. I was
Tell
on the
them,
fence, but
kids.
I'm sticking with the
Kids, it's not all about suffering. There's more to
yeah,
life.
I'll tell them.
There's more to
Well,
life.
except for you were chosen
Yeah.
to suffer. For the rest,
Except for you, Alex.
and maybe
I've
you
been watching
two,
you.
and maybe
Yeah.
you're all chosen.
Alex and Jason,
hope.
you too. Yeah.
That kid.
All right. Take care, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Hey, Gil.
I guess 33. So if God would run the world purely through the system of Mazal, some righteous people would suffer and others would prosper based on the type of rectification given to each particular soul. See 7:2. However, the wicked would never suffer. Since there would be no reward and punishment in this world, they would not suffer for their sins. Furthermore, the system of Mazal would not bring suffering upon them, since they would be incapable of rectifying the world by accepting their suffering in pure faith. As anyone suffering would know with certainty that he was righteous, and that he was perfecting the world and increasing his own reward through his suffering. The test would not be so great. But now that there is a system of reward and punishment as well, sometimes the wicked suffer as a punishment for their sins, and even a righteous person can be suffering for a minor sin that he has committed, or as a result of a divine decree. Therefore, it becomes impossible to know why one is suffering, and the test becomes much greater.
Funny. It's really funny, right? Because if only the good people suffer, then you know you're good if you're suffering, so then the suffering's okay. It's really ridiculous. It's great. So part of suffering is thinking that you might be being punished for something that you did wrong.
Yep.
So when I'm worried that I did something wrong because everything is going badly, that's as God designed it. Because otherwise I would know that I'm righteous by the suffering I'm undergoing. That's really cool.
Okay.
It's little logical, beautiful.
Let's say that again. I don't get that.
Well, if let's say that only the people who are righteous suffer, then if I'm suffering, all right, I can deal with the suffering because I know I'm righteous and it only happens to good people. So that means I'm good. But if
Well,
it also
you should
happens,
connect it to the end, because I mean the important thing to then say is, and since I know that I'm righteous,
yeah, I got
as
rewards
evidenced by
coming.
the fact that the rewards coming in the Olam Haba. So sure, it's like going to school. I'll do some studying because I'm going to get a diploma.
This suffering is easy. But
Right.
sometimes you're suffering because you did something wrong. And I often think that I did something wrong when things are going badly. And that's part of the suffering. Like that's part of God's plan. Because in that way, I don't know if I'm suffering because I did something wrong or because I'm really good and this is how to test me and make me better.
But we never know, right?
Never know. Could be either.
Or at least not in this world. We won't know.
I think what I'm learning in this book is that God's plan is ambiguity. Like he's very sure about what's
to
up,
understand. Yes.
but it's not for us to really.
When I went to the Jewish bookstore and told them about the book with all the blank pages, and I told them what book it was, they said, "Oh, it's part of God's plan." And I thought it was really,
Did he really say that?
yeah.
For real?
Supposed to be missing those pages.
It's so funny.
Or it's a punishment for something you did.
A very righteous book.
Either. Could be either.
Also, when I asked them to get another copy, I said, "Where can I find this book?" And they said, "Oh, it's under self-help." I said, "Oh boy, that's my section. Let's go."
That's
Section
some
4.
story,
Any-
Webster.
Anyone reading
you
this book
imagine-
for self-help needs a lot of help.
Could you imagine? Like someone just wandering that section. Oh, knowing God's plan.
I mean, it's paradoxical because the book is called Knowing God's Plan. And,
That's got to be a
and God's
one-star
plan is so
review.
that you don't know it.
Right, right.
This is clearly much more participatory this evening than it's ever been. I wonder if maybe the point is that if we have some bad mazal, or if we, or maybe are getting punished for our deeds, perhaps what the Ramchal is trying to say is that we're supposed to, and this is not easy to do, take it in stride and deal with it righteously. Try to correct ourselves and try to have our actions in the face of hardship still be actions that are righteous. I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I wonder if he's going to say. So let's see if he'll say something about it.
Okay, 33. We think we just read. So, however, I think
Yep.
that's where we're at.
Yeah.
However, God wanted a more difficult test. Therefore, he made sure that we would not be able to understand clearly how he handles each person in this world. Instead, it would seem as if the same thing happens to all, whether one is righteous or wicked. Koheles.
Right. So that's what we said, right? That if, even though there's an intention, if it seems random, it seems random to us, right? Even though there's a plan. Sorry.
Right, and that's the test, right? Not to throw in the towel and say, okay, in the Hebrew, there's in the Gemara at least, it's actually Aramaic, late din, late din, velate dayan. There's no judgment and there's no judge. Like, come on, this it just can't be. There's no sense to this, so you throw in the towel. So that's part of the the test of faith. I would say, above and beyond, like, okay, how do I deal with this righteously? Like, is it a punishment? Is it my mazal? But lurking behind that is like, do I really believe in this stuff? Like, is it really, true? Like that's an act of faith that you, the very fact that you deal with the question of, is this mazal or is this a punishment, is the way to deal with it, right? That's the way of faith, because without faith, you're like, you don't think in those terms. You're like, this is crazy. This is like, random or bad luck. Okay.
Our sages explain this concept in their commentary on the verse just mentioned. King Shlomo looked at all the generations and saw that the wicked and the righteous share the same kinds of experience. Abraham died and Nimrod died. King David reigned for 40 years and Nebuchadnezzar reigned for 40 years. The explanation of this is that God showed him how a particular kind of punishment comes upon a wicked person as a result of a particular transgression he commits. Then he showed him how exactly the same thing happens to a righteous person who is extremely careful not to commit that very transgression. Note 34.
The wicked person may be suffering as a punishment for that particular sin, while the righteous person who is careful to avoid that sin may be suffering the same thing because of a divine decree in order to bring rectification to the world.
This is what happened with Avraham and Nimrod and all the other contrasting pairs of people mentioned there, whose experiences prove the truth of this reality beyond any doubt. 35.
Avraham brought the world closer to God, while Nimrod led a rebellion against God by attempting to build the Tower of Babel. Yet they both had to die. King David prepared the site for the Beis Hamikdash, while Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it. Yet they both reigned for 40 years. Yoshiyahu, king of Yehuda, was righteous, while Achav, king of Israel, was wicked. Yet they were both killed in battle by arrows. These cases and others listed prove that although two people may act in completely opposite ways, they can both experience the same fate. On an exterior level, it looks like there's absolutely no difference between what happens to the wicked and what happens to the righteous.
No one, is that where we are? Yeah, no. No, let's see. God does this in order to give a greater reward to the righteous who strengthen their faith in the face of these challenges. This is the meaning of the verse, and the righteous person lives through his faith. Note 36.
See note on this verse towards the end of chapter 5, part 3.
No one is able to clearly understand what God brings upon him, since God sometimes makes use of the system of reward and punishment, and at other times he makes use of the system of mazal, as we explained. Whenever something happens to a person, it is impossible to tell if it is a reward or a punishment for his actions, or a divine decree from the system of mazal. In each case, there are some elements that would seem to indicate that it is a reward or punishment for his deeds, and other elements that indicate the opposite. Consequently, a person can become very unsettled as a result of the thoughts and ideas spinning through.
We might not understand God's plan, but we understand Jewish angst. This
Old.
is it.
Wow, it's really old.
Guilt is well ingrained.
Wow.
What does it say in Hebrew that where this sentence where does this word consequently a person can become very unsettled? Does he say atvus or something as a result of the thoughts and ideas spinning through his head? Does it really say spinning?
He uses like a weather thing, like a so'er ma'od. It's like a tempestuous kind of word. Barov machshavatav, his thoughts, v'sara pav b'kibo, like his feelings. What has he translated? Thoughts and ideas. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he doesn't use an emotional word. He uses more a intellectual turmoil, right? Your thoughts, yeah, like what's going on? Confusion.
Which word does it begin with?
The second line, so'er.
Oh yeah, so'er ma'od barov.
Right.
Ma'gavo,
Sarah is a wind, right?
Storm. But he says, "Ad shehalev so'er me'od," the heart it becomes stormy. So he's being very sympathetic here to our conundrum.
Yeah.
He writes that on an emotional level, man becomes his man's heart becomes stormy, trying to consider whether his how is it that he deserves his misfortune. Is it because he was not righteous, or is it because there was just mazal?
Okay.
This was without a doubt the most relatable sentence in this entire book yet. For me. I mean, personally, I don't know about the rest of you, but this, I finally feel at home in this text.
That's the first time I marked the entire book as well. I just can't even believe it.
That really spoke to me.
Our condition 570, guys. That's our code. 571.
Yeah.
That's the code word. Okay.
Wow. Okay. However, anyone who is faithful, I don't know if we read this, but however, anyone who is faithful to God must remain steadfast and unwavering in his faith, knowing that all God does, whatever it may be, is just and fair and without any injustice, God forbid. He must not be like the wicked who say, the way of God is not just. He must remain resolute, serving God with a pure heart, equally accepting of whatever comes upon him. Then he will attain the status of one who is truly pure. In conclusion, there are two systems within the Hanhaga, reward and punishment and mazal. God makes use of them according to what he knows is beneficial for his world. In the Midrash of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, there is a statement that contains deep hidden secrets, but one who does not know the principles I have just taught you will take it at face value and consider it strange. This is the statement. At the time when God removes himself from the throne of judgment and from the throne of mercy, there is no reward and punishment. Tikkun Zohar. This seems to suggest that there is no reward or punishment. God forbid. However, The real intent of this statement is to tell us that there are times when God runs the world through the system of mazal rather than the system of reward and punishment. Rather than the system of mazal, the amount of good and bad in the world is dictated by the process bringing the entire creation to its ultimate perfection, as we explained, chapter 9, part 2. Nevertheless, in the world to come, each person will certainly be rewarded or punished according to the way he behaved and according to the consequences of his actions. These words of Rashbi teach us that we should not be disconcerted with the difficult period that precedes the Messianic era if the righteous are demeaned terribly, and people cry out to God without being answered. These and other negative things have already been predicted by our sages. In the prelude to the Messianic era, insolence will abound. The wisdom of scholars will be scorned. Those who fear sin will be despised, and truth will disappear. Sota 49b. Such a situation is the inevitable result of the divine decree that prevails at that time, which determines that even the merits of the right are not able to remedy these defects. The ultimate purpose of all this is to bring about the complete perfection of the world that will follow afterward, when God reveals his absolute oneness, as we explained above, part 1 of this chapter, note 37.
In the pre-Messianic era, the system of Mazal will predominate as God removes himself from the throne of judgment and mercy. Since the redemption is very close, there is a need to bring about the complete revelation of God's oneness. The necessary prelude to this is that evil should be allowed to reach its maximum potential. And God then overturns and destroys this evil through the manifestation of his unlimited power. His absolute oneness is revealed, and from the depth of the darkness, the infinite light is recognized. This explains why, in the period just before the Geulah, God uses the system of divine decree to intensify evil and falsity, while the merits of the righteous are, for the moment, ignored. See Klalim Rishonim 34. Harav Chaim Friedland wrote in his commentary that these principles help us understand the terrible decrees that have come upon the Jewish people in the recent times, since we are now in the immediate prelude to the Messianic era.
Okay. However, we
Right.
need to
Just, it's fascinating. Rav Avadia Yosef was the Sephardi chief rabbi. And he came out with this statement once. He said, why is it that Ashkenazi Jewry suffered in the Holocaust much worse than Sephardi Jewry? And he said, because of the Enlightenment and the fact that, Ashkenazi Jewry had basically left in droves, left the religion. And a lot of people took a lot of what's the word I'm looking for?
Umbrage
with Rav Avadia for that. And when you read this, you're like, hang on a second, like maybe just the opposite. Maybe these people were righteous, right? Maybe these were the righteous people that God, this mazal for this evil to come into this world that apparently kind of needed to, was for that generation that could handle it.
Is the premise even true? I thought the Sephardi populations were also decimated in Italy,
generally.
in Spain, in other parts. Not as bad as but for sure they had massive casualties, I believe also. I don't know.
I think by that time, first of all, I don't think there were many Jews in Spain.
Sure.
Most
Sorry,
of the
North Africa.
Yeah, the North African Jews. No, I don't think
The
so.
Germans had significant. Anyway, we can look into this, but I'm pretty sure that they also suffered rather dramatically.
I'm sure they did suffer, but I don't think the numbers compare.
I'm not sure, but it depends.
I don't.
Again, I'm not 100%.
Or you have some anecdotal evidence.
No, I remember reading some stuff about this in the past, but
Yeah.
on the numbers of coming out of like Greece, for example, like I think the
Yeah.
population there was completely decimated. So proportionately, for example, the number of Greek Jews before and after. Again, this is something I remember from 20, 30 years ago that I read. So it could be that the numbers are different or that I got some bad source that long ago. That's why I'm asking.
Right.
Sorry. Anyway.
Gentlemen, it's 9:41. There are still 1, 2, 1. Oh, no, can we do it? 1.5 pages? Let's go. Lev, I won't speak again.
Okay, where are we? However, we need to understand a principle that would be of great benefit to us. Is that where we are?
Yep.
Okay, since it will help resolve many doubts. The principle is as follows. Even when God chooses to run the world through the system of Mazal that we mentioned, he does so in such a way that even those things that are dictated by Mazal do not contradict the system of reward and punishment. An example of this is the suffering of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, about which our sages said, through something negative that he did, it came upon him, and through something positive that he did, it went away. Bava Metzia, and note 38.
The Talmud describes how Rabbi Yehuda was afflicted by horrendous physical suffering for 13 years. The real cause of the suffering was a decree from the system of Mazal, the purpose of which was to rectify the world. Nevertheless, the suffering only actually came upon him as a result of an extremely minor sin that he committed. A calf, while being taken away to be slaughtered, broke away and hid its head under Rabbi Yehuda's cloak, crying in fright. He showed it no pity, declaring that it was created for the purpose of being slaughtered. Only after another episode where he showed compassion to some small creatures did the suffering finally come to an end. We see that even though his suffering was not because of his sins, because of Mazal, there still needed to be a minor pretext within the system of reward and punishment before the decree could actually come about, and another minor positive action before it could be terminated.
Yeah, I know I said I wouldn't speak. Sorry. The Maharal explains that he uses this idea to explain why Moses was not allowed into the land for striking the rock. Says, that there was a mazal that Moshe should not come into the land, but it couldn't. The word in yeshiva is chal. It couldn't happen. It couldn't take effect unless Moshe had a sin, because it would have been, a complete. Completely ignoring a reward and punishment. So there had to be something there that it could take effect.
In reality, this suffering was really just part of the suffering of the righteous. However, this is the way that God chooses to act. He combines these two systems together. Even the decrees dictated by Mazal only come about through some action that conforms to the system of reward and punishment, which can be used as a pretext. As a result of this action, everything that needs to take place according to the dictates of Mazal will come about, even though the action itself is just of minor importance. 39.
Oh. Yeah, pre-read.
Should I read this or no?
Yeah, you can, because actually not about Moshe.
No, not the same one. The Maharal gives another example of this concept. The real reason the Jewish people had to go through the terrible exile in Egypt was because it was part of the divine plan, leading to the miracles of the Exodus and the revelation of God's power in the world. However, the Torah seems to suggest the degree of exile was a punishment for the very slight lack of faith that Avraham showed regarding one of God's promises, Bereshit 15:8. Here too, a minor pretext
Abraham
was needed.
Questions God and says, "B'me'eda, how am I going to know that my children will receive the land, inherit the land?"
Here too, a minor pretext was needed before the divine decree of suffering could be activated. Rav Chaim Friedman.
In conclusion, the true purpose of the Hanhaga is to bring about the complete perfection of all God's creations. This process is based on the innate characteristics of the creations themselves, according to how God made them with all their deficiencies. Note 40.
At the beginning of part 2 of this chapter, we learned that God intentionally arranged the creation as it is with all its imperfections, and that only He knows its true structure. Therefore, only He knows what is required in order to remove all the imperfections and perfect the world. He achieves this through the system of Mazal, which takes no notice of our merits and deeds.
Where's 40? Everything that this system brings about is part of a complex process leading to the aforementioned complete perfection of these creations by removing all their deficiencies. This process is governed by profound laws and patterns of operation that are totally beyond our understanding. At the same time that everything is being guided toward its ultimate perfection, the system of reward and punishment is also guiding events. This latter system is the one that is clearly visible, dictating all the laws of heaven and earth. Nevertheless, all its patterns and laws are inwardly linked to the process of the perfection of the world that we mentioned. They are not two opposing and conflicting systems. Rather, the main underlying system is one bringing the world to its ultimate perfection. However, God, in his infinite wisdom, arranged laws of reward and punishment that are appropriate for the period of time when the secondary system needs to operate. These laws, on their inner level, relate in a suitable manner to the requirements of the system, leading the world to its eventual perfection and parallel. Therefore, the system of reward and punishment never moves from the center of the system, leading the world to perfection. Note 41.
The system of reward and punishment is always controlled by the central and fundamental requirements of the deeper underlying system of perfection.
In fact, it parallels it and connects with it. Whatever is required by the system of perfection is actually channeled through the ways of reward and punishment, as we explained. However, God concealed the understanding.
Sorry, Lev. You could think of it as, pouring. It's a visual, but pouring some oil or wine through a filter that then goes through another filter. So, the first filter is correcting the world, bringing the world to its perfection. But then the second filter is reward and punishment. Like it can't get to this world without going through that filter. So, it's okay. The world needs the Jewish people to be in Egypt. But then on the second filter, it can't go through unless there's some sort of, Abraham made a mistake. Good. It can, that's an opening for it to flow through.
However, God concealed the understanding of this elevated system of perfection from created beings, except for the Ramchal. We cannot understand the system itself or any of its details, nor can we know how it relates to the system of reward and punishment. These matters are not revealed. Note 42.
We cannot know why suffering has been decreed upon a particular person or group and how exactly it is rectifying the world. All we can know is why on a general level it should be that some people suffer and others prosper, even though their merits are the same. Nor can we understand to what extent the events around us are part of the system of Mazal and not due to our deeds, and to what extent they are actually reward or punishment for our actions. Even Moshe, the greatest prophet of all, was not allowed to understand these things. See above section 8, chapter 1, part 1, and Barachos 7a. The reason for this is that this concealment is the source of our free choice. And if we recede beyond it, there would be no test and no reward.
No prophet or seer has ever been able to arrive at a clear understanding of all this. They saw what they saw, but were unable to understand it clearly, remaining with a multitude of doubts. Our sages mentioned this point in Baruch 7a with regard to the verse, I will show favor to whomever I wish, and I will have mercy on whomever I wish. Shemos 33:19, note 43.
Whenever the prophets saw this level of God's guidance of the world in a prophetic vision, they saw contradictory images which they could not understand. In explanation of this, God told Moshe that he could not understand the system of Mazal, nor how it combines with reward and punishment. I will show favor to whomever I wish, even if in your eyes it makes no sense and it is not deserved.
Shkoyach.
Wow. All right, we made a lot of progress.
That was a lot. Thank you. Sorry for running so late.
Well, I
That was
read
a
kind
tough chapter.
Yeah. I thought
Everybody.
it was actually quite a good one. Somewhat understandable and relatable.
Probably the most important one we've read so far. It
Yeah.
sounds like everything was a setup for this.
I know it's
How
kind of
it
it came
feels.
together very nicely in this chapter.
Spinning head.
It's by design. That's always been driving me crazy, right? Like I've had this spinning head forever, and I always thought it was,
Just you?
you know, well, I thought it was a, what do you call it? A bug, not a feature.
There you go. Nice way of putting it. All right, gentlemen. Wow. Wow. Hang on a second.
Yeah, we're pretty close to where I'm wrapping it up.
Oh, it is a chapter 10. I thought we were yeah, we're kind of there. See you next week. I am traveling, actually going to London for a wedding.
Nice.
So I'll be coming back on Tuesday afternoon. I really hope I'll be up to it.
Let us know.
Okay. Awake or sleeping, I'll be here.
Sure.
Okay. Safe
Night,
travel.
everybody.
Guys, have a great night's sleep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you, Lev, for the reading. Thanks, Jason. Goodbye, guys.
You read it helped keep me awake.
I know. I'm glad you did it. All right. Bye. Have a
See you.
great week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.